Well, and we were, it is largely white, but as I mentioned, there was a small Mexican community there of about 3,000 people or so, maybe 2 to 3,000 people. And so um, we, it was interesting because for whatever reason, my family moved over to, quote, the other side of town, which largely there were railroad tracks that divided our city, and on one side of the tracks were poor whites, blacks, Native Americans, and Mexicans, and on the other side was largely white families. But for whatever reason, we moved over about 2 blocks on the other side of the tracks, which put us in an all-white neighborhood. I mean, we were the only. Actually, there were 2 Mexican families that I knew of in a large for several blocks. Maybe that could have been all that there were on the entire west side of town. So we grew up in largely an all-white neighborhood. And when we first got there, my older brother, I remember him telling me stories of him going to school, and of course he spoke only Spanish, and how the kids would run circles around him, calling him names, Beaner, Wetback, whatever, and and making fun of him because he couldn't speak English. So by the time it got down to me, the last of 7 kids, my parents had been told by people there that you need to have your kids speak English, and so they had stopped trying to get us to learn Spanish, and so by the time it got down to me, my family largely was all English speaking except for my parents. My older siblings, because I was the youngest of 7, they were all speaking only English. My parents didn't require us or force us to respond to them in Spanish. We heard Spanish, and that has helped me to this day. But I never spoke it. In fact, by the time I was a young adult, 17 and 18, I was afraid to speak Spanish because I knew I'd sound like a fool. And when you're 17 or 18 years old, you don't want to be sounding like a fool, right? But I was, very involved in high school athletics and things. So all my friends were white. All my friends were English speaking, and none of my friends were Spanish speakers. And so, I grew up in that dichotomy, which is the reality for a lot of Latinos in this country anymore, where, you grow up in a largely white area or in an area where, and with the media the way it is, it's all, everything, all your inputs are in English, and that's what you end up learning. So yeah, I had a very different growing up experience from many Latinos, although I would say it's increasingly it's like that more and more, where you grow up and so many kids grow up not knowing their native tongue.